This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Sam Abul-Samad from Navigant Research.
And I'm Rebecca Lindland from Rebecca Drives.
All right, so we're going to talk about the FCA Renault merger and then back out and with some tweels and some other things. But first, we're going to talk about what we're driving. And Samuel, you were mostly a passenger this week, you said. You also got yourself into the 2019 Hyundai Tucson Ultimate for a while.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, I was mostly a passenger most of this week as I was in New York for several days with my wife. I was speaking at a conference in Manhattan and spent some time taking advantage of the New York City subway system, which actually, was not bad. It was actually... It's a better way to get around than anything above ground. And, when Elon Musk disses mass transit, I say, fuck you, Elon. And you can bleep that out.
Oh, wow. You know what? We're not going to. Anyway, did you see any pizza rats?
Did not see any pizza rats. Did not see any. Okay. Did not see any rodents of any kind. There was a bagpiper in one of the subway stations.
Okay.
Right around rush hour, so that was entertaining. But no, we used Lyft a few times to get to and from the airport, and on a couple of other trips. Did a lot of walking. Walked through Central Park and spent some time on the subway to go to Brooklyn and also to head downtown to Chelsea to go and take a walk along the High Line, which is if you visit New York or if you live in New York and you have not walked the High Line yet, it's definitely something you should do. I mean, it's a pretty amazing place, but that's for another conversation. But before we left for New York, did get to spend a few days with the refreshed 2019 Hyundai Tucson. Tucson being Hyundai's compact, but not quite subcompact crossover. It's been around for a while in a couple of different iterations now, and I've liked the current generation Tucson. I like the design of it. I like the driving dynamics of it. For 2019, it got a bit of a refresh. They tweaked the front fascia a little bit, tweaked the lights, as companies, automakers are wont to do in the middle of a product life cycle. Changed some specs. They dropped the 1.6 liter turbo that had been in there as the premium engine. So now you just have the 2 liter naturally aspirated, now paired with let's see, it's still a 6-speed, 6-speed automatic, in both cases, 6-speed with the 2 liter, and then a 7-speed automatic with the 2.4 liter naturally aspirated engine, which is 181 horsepower, 175 foot-pounds of torque, which is adequate for this vehicle. It's not going to win any drag races, but it's fine. I'm not going to complain about it. Gets decent fuel economy. The Tucson, I think is overall attractive. It's nice on the inside. It's well executed. It's not. I wouldn't call it luxurious. I probably wouldn't put, one of its competitors is the Mazda CX-5, which we've talked about at some length in the past. And I think the CX-5 overall has a better, a nicer interior, nicer materials. It feels a little more premium. And, the price point, as we've discussed before, reflects that. It's got a premium feel. The Tucson I drove was the Ultimate trim, which is the top end trim. Now one of 7 different trim levels they have on the Tucson now, with various combinations of options on there. And this one was front wheel drive. It was not all wheel drive. And even with that, the price came to almost $33,000 delivered, which is a little bit higher than I'm used to seeing on a Tucson like this. Still good, $5,000-$6,000 cheaper than the last CX-5 I drove. And I'd say in a lot of ways it feels like it, but that's it's
right. It feels feels a couple grand cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, mainly just in terms of the materials. Just the materials, the dashboard materials, don't feel as premium. But that doesn't take away anything from the functionality. Although I do like that the Tucson or like the Mazda has a central rotary controller, which Hyundai does not use, at least on Hyundai brand vehicles. They do on Genesis, but not on Hyundai's. So it's a touchscreen, but it's a nice touchscreen. It's an 8-inch touchscreen. It's got Hyundai's standard user interface on there, which works very well. No complaints about that. The screens that they use, the actual displays that Hyundai uses on their vehicles are actually, I think, some of the best I've seen, among almost any brand, because they don't have any glare. When the sun is shining in from the side, you don't see any reflections off of it. It doesn't get washed out in bright sunlight. It's easy to read all the time. As you know, I'm not crazy about touchscreens in general, but it does work. This one, the display itself works, and it looks good and it's usable. And at this price point, most of almost all of the safety features, active driver assist features that you would expect are included in this vehicle. So it's got adaptive cruise control, forward collision avoidance with pedestrian detection, lane keeping assist, and Hyundai's lane keeping assist. I think I've talked about it before on some of the other models like the Elantra. Actually works really well and does a really good job of actually trying to center the car in the lane so it's not ping-ponging back and forth, and actually tracks the lane surprisingly well. It's not a hands-off system like a Super Cruise. It's a hands-on system, but it does what you would expect it to. Makes reduces the workload of the driver a little bit while still requiring the driver to remain attentive. And blind spot monitoring, hill assist control, all those usual features that you increasingly find in a lot of vehicles now. So I think it's a pretty decent value in the segment. Today, about the only thing you can really add to this one that I was driving is the all-wheel drive, which adds about another $1,500 to it, and that's pretty much maxed out. Everything else is in here. Leather seats, heated seats, heated steering wheel, all the good stuff. And the design changes they did this year to the front fascia, basically, a little more in keeping with kind of the direction they've gone in the past year or so with the Sonata and the Elantra and some of the other models, a little bit sharper edged at the front, a little more sharply creased around the headlights. And I think it's a nice update.
How did it drive?
It drives well. The ride quality is really good. It's not it's not a sport crossover or a sporting crossover, but its driving dynamics are good. It doesn't understeer too much. At the limit it'll understeer, but it's got fairly precise steering. Not a lot of feedback, but it's got fairly precise steering, and it goes exactly where you point it.
Who could ask for more?
I certainly could, but it would certainly cost a lot more too.
Yeah, I was actually, so when you said it was like 33, I was actually surprised it wasn't more, because it's not actually that expensive. I realize it's a compact, but A, they're not that compact, and B, like you were talking about the CX-5. I'm trying to think of other things that it competes with, right? Like the CR-V, or is it too small to be a CR-V competitor?
No, it's in the same class as the CR-V, the RAV4, the Ford Escape. A little bit shorter than the Nissan Rogue. Closer to like the Rogue Sport size, because it's a 2-row. The Rogue, although. Really, the Rogue should not be a 3-row. It's got that vestigial third row there, but it's in that same segment, which is one of the largest segments in the market today.
Yeah, I think that's why they offer so many different sort of ways to configure it, because they understand they're going to sell a lot of them, and people may want them slightly different. And it's sort of like a way to make some options without having too many like individual selections available too. So it's a clever way to sort of stagger the lineup. I am curious at why they have the 2-liter and the 2.4, because the 2.4 doesn't make that much more power or torque than the 2-liter. And the last time I drove one, it had the 1.6, which has a pretty nice flat torque curve. So maybe it's the torque curve that the larger engine provides.
Yeah,
still.
well, the 2.4, the 2 liters 150 foot-pounds. The 2.4 is 175, but the peak is lower. So the 2 liters at 4,700 RPM, and the 2.4 is at 4,000 RPM. So that does make a noticeable difference. Having compared these same engines, in other Hyundai products before, like the Sonata in particular, you can feel the difference in performance between these two engines. The 2.4 definitely feels stronger.
As well it should. And I do like that they're naturally aspirated too, so that they don't do that turbo thing where it's good fuel economy numbers on the sticker and then just thirsty as hell in reality too. You know that a naturally aspirated engine is going to sort of hit its numbers.
Right, and this one, with the 2.4, it's rated in front-wheel drive form. It's rated at 22 city, 28 highway, 25 combined. I got about 26 overall during my time driving it. The all-wheel drive, you lose a couple of miles per gallon off of each of those numbers. So I think that it's, if you're looking for more fuel economy, you probably want to stick with the 2-liter. And I think this may be one area where, particularly later this year, you're going to start to see some competitors that really outdo these numbers, particularly, with the new Escape, which is going to be available as both a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid version. There should be a CR-V hybrid arriving maybe late this year, probably early 2020. It's already on sale in Europe and in Japan. It will be coming here at some point. They just haven't said exactly when. There's also, of course, the RAV4 hybrid and other, other more efficient options. But, I think, these numbers are not bad for this thing. And, the price point is certainly fairly competitive.
That's the Hyundai thing.
Yeah.
So all right. Let me change it up on us a little bit, and we'll go from affordable and efficient to completely not affordable. Because I was driving an AMG C43 convertible the week before
nice.
this. It was quite nice, but it's $78,000 for a C class. Which I know Mercedes have always been expensive.
Yeah, but it's an AMG, so $78,000 is a bargain.
That's true.
You have to put it in perspective.
Top. And it's not the AMG 63 either. It's the C43. So it's definitely a split personality car though, because for the first couple days it was rainy and I had the top up and I left it in comfort mode, which is the default when you start it. And there's the fact that I don't really like convertibles all that much. This one, I think certainly the styling is interrupted, shall we say, by the convertible top. It's just not good looking with the top up. It looks kind of weird and lumpy. But in comfort mode too, it really modulates your inputs, so it doesn't feel as lively. The car kind of lays there, I guess, if that's a good way to phrase it. It's just, it operates like a car, but it doesn't seem to have any sort of spirit to it, And then you put the top down and you put it in Sport Plus mode, and it's hilarious. especially if you, because it opens up the
Somehow,
exhaust.
I don't think
into,
that's the descriptor that the folks in the Falterbach were looking for.
No, it is hilarious, good fun. It scared the bejesus out of my 11-year-old because in Sport Plus mode, it has an active exhaust, so it'll open it up to powerful mode for the exhaust, and when you put it in manual shift mode too, so you can play with the paddles. And the I think it's the 9G Tronic it's actually quite good using flappy paddles, and that's also a thing that I'm not really all that enthused by, but it works here. It will burble and spit and crackle like Overrun, but also when you shift it, depending on where your foot is and what RPM the engine's turning, it will actually just pop like somebody shot a 22 next to you. It just gives off this loud, just like pop every time you shift, and it startled him, and he was like, "What was that?" And I'm laughing my head off. I was like, "Oh, that's awesome!" Because the whole car sharpens up. The steering gets better. It gets a lot more responsive to your inputs, and it really, like, this is a car that comes alive when you put it in Sport Plus mode. So I like that it has its it's noticeably different through its modes, and it really is best with the top down in Sport or Sport Plus mode, being used as it's sort of supposed to be because it has an AMG badge. It's good looking with the top down. It looks really, really good. It's a nice convertible. The interior is lovely and nicely finished. It's not quite as nice as the G550 I was in.
How is that touchpad thing to interact with?
Yeah, so I don't like it because you brush it and it'll do stuff like if you just move your hand, right, or you get your cup of coffee or something and you brush across it and all of a sudden it changes the station or whatever. You're like, what is going on? Yes. So I tend to actually shut that stuff off when I have the opportunity or I'm just reminded, so that I'm not doing that, because I do think it's nice that you can use it as an input device, but swipe and gesture control was probably helpful, but I was okay with the rotary controller, although I think that's also kind of clunky. There were times where I was just like, I wish this was a touch screen, so I could just do what I need to do.
Really, when I've been in Mercedes, I had the GLE 350 recently. One of the things that I think they've done a really nice job on, as far as the HMI, is the steering controls. I don't know, the controls on the steering wheel, I should say, I just think are really clear and concise and minimal. And I don't know, there's just something that really appeals to me.
On the new GLE or on the previous generation?
On the new GLE. Yeah, the new GLE. It's this brushed satin finish, and there's just small icons. I just think they're really clear and really well placed, and just much more. They're more intuitive. I think I always look to see like what's on the right hand and what's on the left hand, and that's I'm right hand dominant, but so I don't know. I felt like it was a really nice setup.
No, I agree, and one of the things that Mercedes and BMW and Volvo, all the Europeans tend to be pretty good at is standardizing those driver critical features. So, going from a G550 to the C43, it's the exact same controls on the steering wheel spokes, for cruise and stuff. So you know that the little button for resume is there. You know how to, start up the cruise control and use it. And there's the little rocker, I think, on the other, or the little thumb wheel for audio volume on the other spoke. And so it makes sense from car to car to car. They've had established this is the Mercedes way, and we're going to do it this way in all of our cars. So I think that's nice, and I did like it because it's not festooned with all kinds of controls that you got to look at them to figure out what they are. You can operate them by feel and know your way around. I also liked in the C43, it has hard buttons on the console to navigate to. You can hit map, you can hit Navi, you can hit. There's a button for radio and phone, which I didn't. I don't think that was there in the G550. So I had to use the menus more, So it was actually a little easier to use with hard buttons. And if they were there in the G550 and I missed them, shame on me. So somebody can let us know.
I think I had them in the GLE as well. So that may be the new version of it. But I agree. I think that they were there. I like having those two options, either menu driven or just buttons.
Yeah, if you're gonna go and drop $77,000, $78,000 on a C-Class convertible, this is highly recommended if you have the means. I'll quote Ferris Bueller, because it's a good fun car that can also, when you set it into its sort of boring mode, can just be like that Sunday driver, C-Class, because the C-Class is like. That's the Mercedes that it's a crapshoot when you get behind, whether it's going to be somebody just like tottering along and out for ice cream and, make you lose your mind. Or, this one, which has certainly quite a bit of performance packed into it. It's a really good performer. The 3-liter twin turbo engine, it doesn't sound all that powerful these days. It's 362 horsepower, 384 pound-feet of torque. It moves this thing along quite well, and it sounds great doing it. It's just overall, it's a really good package. It's good looking. It's a decent size. Visibility does kind of suck with the roof up, but it's a convertible, so put the roof down, and you can put it down while you're moving. Because while it was sunny out, I would do it on the exit ramp.
Was there a speed? Was there a max speed on that?
There probably is. Didn't do it while I was moving very quickly. I did, it was like 5 or 10 miles an hour at the most.
Okay.
It turns into giant airfoil if you're not careful.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Mercedes parts are not cheap to have them just get torn off the car. From the earliest days of the C43, back in the late 90s, when they first came out with the C43, and it had I think it had a V8 in it at that point. That car is one of those ones that was on the list. I was a college student in my last year of school at that point, and I was like, I must own this someday. And that never happened. And now those C43s, which were kind of a touchstone, they were kind of rusty, and it's hard to find one that didn't get flogged, and they're kind of expensive when you do find a good one. So they're kind of not on my list anymore for practical reasons. But I'm pleased that you can still go and buy a C43, and while it's not exactly the same car for sure, or the same formula, it's very entertaining. So I'd like it better as a coupe, but it's a very good convertible, and it even had red leather, which I like red leather. It won me over.
I love red leather.
Yeah, especially with white or black, and this is
I love
black.
That.
So it's a sharp car, and then. This week I had to come down off my high a little bit, and I'm still driving a Nissan Pathfinder. This is the Platinum, so it has all the options and stuff. The Pathfinder is just such a mess to drive. It's a good family car. It's a good family wagon, but it's pokey. Now it doesn't feel like it's all that lively. And it feels big. Like we were talking about the Telluride last week and how surprisingly nimble and
right.
small that drives. The Pathfinder's the other way. The Pathfinder feels enormous, and it's sloppy on the road. It's not my favorite car to drive.
Which is impressive. I was going to say it's impressive because it's actually classed as a small SUV by PA.
That's right.
How do they class that as a small SUV? It's huge.
Because the classifications are based on the gross vehicle weight rating, so the maximum weight of the vehicle and its payload, and so Nissan limits the GVW of the Pathfinder to 5,985 pounds. And
so it can tow like 500 pounds.
Anything under 6,000 pounds is considered small SUV. Over 6,000 pounds is a standard SUV.
Doing it by weight doesn't make any sense.
This is the government. I'm here to help.
There's a lot of things about corporate average fuel economy that don't make sense.
Yeah. So in that sense, though, it's nice and roomy. And I actually really like the second row seats in the Pathfinder because they clear a much better path than the Telluride because of the system that Nissan has where it lifts the front cushion of the second row seat as they slide forward. It opens up more space to climb into the back, the third row of the Pathfinder. So that I thought was nice because that's sort of the Achilles heel of any of these three rows is that how much of an access you're going to get to that third row. And that's really sort of the one shortcoming of the Telluride is they do their best to make that path as big as it can be, but the Pathfinder's better in that sense to get in and out of. So, it's just, and it's not that I've been in premium hardware for the last couple of weeks, and now to get a not luxury brand car, or just like a normal brand car, the Pathfinder is just, it's a good wagon queen family truckster if you buy, based on a checklist. But in terms of driving dynamics, it needs some attention to be better.
Nissan is so frustrating because I think some of their products are just really good and they could be really good. There's just tweaks that they need to make to them that just don't get done for some reason. Yeah,
I mean, it would be great if it had a manual and, the V38 DT, the GTR engine.
Those aren't exactly the tweaks I was talking about.
Well, these are the tweaks that I would ask for. So what are you driving?
So I was out in California last week. Actually, I just got back on Wednesday, and I have to give a shout out to General Motors because they did provide me with a vehicle for the week. However, the only vehicle that they had available was the Cadillac Escalade ESV Platinum in black.
Well, then you don't need a hotel.
I don't need a hotel, but I did need a no, this is not an Uber sign.
Yeah, you could have earned a few extra bucks while you were out there.
That's true.
Definitely could have done.
doing Uber XL.
Exactly. But what was so interesting is that when I told somebody that what I had, and I said something about, I feel like I'm driving an Uber, she's like, what do you mean? And apparently in Southern California, especially not so much if it's not black, a lot of other colors, but this is very much seen as a family car. And it's just, I feel like I don't know if the marketing just has skewed it so far away from that in the greater New York area. But the family car, if you're going to get a GM product, is the Tahoe. It's not the Escalade.
Well, how is that a family car, especially in eco-conscious California? Is it just because it's so big, it's a good place to spend time baking in the sun idling on the 405 with the air conditioner on?
I don't know, but sure enough, I mean, she was right. I was up in Santa Monica and then I went down to Newport Beach and I did see quite a few typical soccer mom kind of women driving them. And I was fascinated by that.
I will say, as someone with a family, I've got two smaller kids. I do love it, especially when I get the long wheelbase, full size SUVs. Yeah. I adored the Expedition.
I got to tell you, this thing was it was surprisingly a lot of fun to drive. Just like the Telluride, it drove much smaller than it looks for sure. Parking was ridiculous.
It's a Cadillac. You park it wherever you want.
Parking did require some planning and negotiating and such. Yeah. But it has all of the cameras and it has all the grids and everything you could possibly need to park the boat. But it was actually a surprisingly fun vehicle to drive. It has that small block V8. It's got a 10-speed automatic. And I took a picture of my fuel economy because I was curious. So I drove it 212 miles and I got 14.4 miles per gallon, which is pretty darn good considering how much traffic is out there. I mean, I sat in a lot of traffic. So I thought that was pretty impressive.
That's the 6.2. Oh, go ahead.
Does that one have auto stop start on it?
It does. And I like to keep that activated because I'm always curious about the transparency of that. That's a big engine to get started up again. And they did a fantastic job on making that pretty darn transparent to the user. So it's just, I mean, it's a boat for sure. And it's over $98,000. But man, it was a lot of fun. It really was.
More like an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the Nimitz.
Felt very delicate in it.
But you know, there is a certain charm to them, and I can see. So if you, for me, like Southern California seems like a ludicrous place
yes.
for that. But again, I'm not from Southern California, so I'm sure Boston would also seem like a ludicrous place for it. And I not necessarily the ESVs, but those things are everywhere here too, because they have that utility portion of what they do.
Sure.
And if you're a family that goes, you pull the trailer or you go skiing up where it snows or whatever, you just need a versatile vehicle and you don't want to have to really be thinking about it. You want the thing to be ready and be able to handle whatever you need to do.
Yes.
Full-size SUVs do that, and they do it at a penalty, of course. Like your fuel economy wasn't great.
Yeah.
Because that has what, the 6.2?
It has a 6.2 liter, but I mean, I know, no, it was in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't great, but probably 7, 8, 9 years ago, that would have been more like 10, 11, 12.
Yeah. Does that have cylinder deactivation too?
It does, yes.
Yeah. So
yeah, and yeah.
They're doing everything they can other than making a hybrid. And I remember the Escalade hybrid.
Hybrid, yeah. They did make the hybrid. So there's a couple things that
which they sold at least
really
20
great.
or 30 of.
I liked that. I think I got about 17 miles to the gallon out of one.
Yeah. So, I mean, the interior is really nice, super, super functional. They have the charging pad in the center console, like the armrest. That's where the charging pad is.
So they want you to put your phone away and use Q.
No, it's outside. It sits outside the armrest, but it's accessible to 4 or 5 of the potentially 8 occupants in the car because of where it is, which is really clever because so everyone can kind of take turns charging their phone, and it charged really, really well. So that was kind of a neat feature, I thought. And then, of course, it has room for a 6-pack in the cooler that's tucked inside
of your finest microbrew.
Exactly. And my only complaint there was that you had to remember to turn it on every time you turned the car on. So like if we were doing a bunch of errands on Saturday in the Orange, California area, and I had to keep remembering to turn it on because we did have a cooler. We had some stuff in there, but otherwise, and the button was inside. I would have liked to have had the button outside just as a reminder, but it was really cool. I mean, that was neat. The unusual part was having the gear selector on the column on the steering wheel column. That was just so weird because I'm so used to having them in the center console now. And so it was kind of funny to go back to that very traditional steering column shifter.
But it works, doesn't it? It gets it out of the way.
It does work, except I kept putting it into low and then I have to go back up again. But that was my own issue. But I mean, the vehicle itself, the floorboards come out automatically. Like they just did so many little features, and it was a lot of fun to drive. I'm glad I don't own one, but it was a lot of fun to drive. If this is the vehicle you need for your lifestyle, it's fantastic.
I can't complain about them. I love full-size SUVs, realizing that they're a ridiculous choice. But and it's been a while since I've been in an Escalade, so I would love to see where the interior sort of is. Because the last time I was in one, I was like, oh, we're in a Chevy truck.
Yeah, I think.
Yep.
I will say that I think a very valid alternative is the Chevy Tahoe or the GMC Yukon Denali.
Yeah.
For significantly less, because I don't know that they have really differentiated it enough, the Cadillac enough to justify the price point. But if luxury is, a priority for you, this thing definitely is a lot of fun. I mean, it really was. It was.
If you
great.
actually need a 3-row giant SUV, the Navigator or Expedition may actually be a better choice for you, because the third row is actually more usable in those.
Yes.
Because of the independent rear suspension.
Sure.
There should be the new GM full size SUVs should be coming out next year, and they are expected to adopt an independent rear suspension.
Oh,
finally.
that's right. I do remember reading that recently. That was actually surprising because they've been a holdout for so long. And it's funny that you mentioned that going down to a Yukon or a Tahoe. I tend to prefer those more sort of commoner brands. Because I have had the Navigator a couple of times, and it's nice and all, but the controls are actually kind of obtuse in it, and the design feels glitzy to me. Like, it looks good in pictures. I'm not sure that I like it as much in person. And the Expedition was just it had better more easy controls, more physical knobs and buttons and stuff. So simpler. And it was really, I had the Expedition Platinum. It was just as comfortable, if not more. I liked the seats better in the Ford. And it was still really nicely appointed. There's not a whole lot to complain about. So
yeah. I mean, the biggest difference, obviously, the two. There's the Yukon Denali. I think it has a 5.2 liter engine. So the engine is definitely different. You're not going to get quite as much power from it. But it's, like $20,000, $25,000 less.
So, and that is, I guess, that is a concern. If
I'm sorry. The Denali does have the 6.2 liter.
The Denali has the 6.2.
Yeah.
The Tahoe probably starts with the 5.3.
Right. So the Denali has the exact same engine in it for 70, and it starts at 70,000. So, it's just bargain.
$70,000. I could probably pay off my mortgage for that.
Who needs college?
Yeah.
But it was really, I have to say, it was a lot of fun. Just it has such a great presence on the road, and there's a lot of cars that kind of blend in that nobody sort of looks at twice. But the Cadillac Escalade ESV definitely draws the eyeballs.
Yeah,
not necessarily everywhere. I think in Manhattan, for example, I don't think it. I think it just kind of blends in because there's so many of them.
That's true.
Well,
yeah.
Right, and they're all Ubers, and that's what's so interesting.
Ubers are other black cars, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
And so, but on the West Coast, I think they're not seen quite as dramatically as I just assume that, especially
on the West Coast, everybody uses Teslas for Ubers.
Yeah.
Why would you use a Tesla?
Because it's California.
Again. In today's episode of things that just don't make sense. Anyway, you also let's move on to the other luxury car you had too. Briefly, you still have the Genesis G90, and
yes.
And when we talked about this in Slack a little bit, my take on Genesis is that they're making really, really good late '90s German luxury cars.
So I can wait for that till next week when I put some more miles on it. Although I do also have a very special vehicle coming next week. I have the Acura NSX, which I do love.
Oh, I think we could probably find a whole episode worth of things to talk about the NSX.
So I have the G90, the Genesis G90 all-wheel drive in Ultimate, and it's very nice. I mean, the appointments, the touch, the feel, the quality, the materials is very nice. Similar to your experience with the C43, though, I almost have to put this car in sport. It is so floaty in what they call smart mode.
Yeah.
So last year, Genesis is always very generous, and I usually go to Pebble Beach with them, and they cart us around in the G90, and my friend Fiona and I would sit in the back, and our driver would be up front, obviously. And I can get car sick pretty quickly. I've learned to manage it over the years, but Fiona almost never gets car sick and motion sickness or anything. And the two of us got so car sick almost every time that we started to almost hesitate Like one of us, we would trade places sitting in the front because we were getting so car sick in the back. And driving this G90, I had that same feeling of just floating along. Like you don't have enough connection to the road. As soon as I put it in sport, the suspension tightened up, the RPMs tightened up, the steering to everything became more fun and more importantly, more connected to the road because it wasn't a good feeling, which is disappointing because I think the car is beautiful. But I don't know if I'd be curious to see if other people have had this sensation, especially sitting in the back.
Yeah, I make it a point to not sit in the back.
Yeah.
I would agree that it's kind of soft. I didn't find it to be that floaty when I drove the G90, but it's definitely on the soft side in normal mode or auto mode. Sport mode definitely tightens things up.
Definitely fun. I did try. A couple of years or so ago, I had the G70 in Korea, and that was all sorts of fun. But I just feel like the G90, they've kind of, I don't know, they've just sort of overcorrected it. So as I said, I just got it. Unfortunately, I only have it for a few days because I've got the NSX coming in, so we're doing some juggling on the cars. But I'm driving it down to New Jersey tomorrow, and I'll get a better feel for all three because they have individual comfort and individual smart and the sport mode. So I'll have a better idea of how it drives. But right now, I don't know. I'm not a fan of that auto mode.
Yeah, I like the individual modes usually where you can set them. So a lot of times I'm fine with the engine and transmission being set in their efficiency or comfort or whatever, where they don't hang on to RPM and we're not trying to be sporty. But I'll set the steering and the suspension to sport because I want the chassis to be a little bit more lively. I don't really care about revving the engine up everywhere. And so I like it when there's that individual setting you can add. I don't know if that exists in the G90, but
it does. Yeah. I'll play around with that a little bit. So this thing has a 5.0 liter V8 engine in it. I mean, it's got 420 horsepower, 8-speed automatic, and I will say I did like the smooth gear transitions. When I put it in sport, it's a definite difference in the RPMs. Like you can really feel it. But it's a great engine. I mean, there's so many good things about it. That's why I'm hoping that I can get the suspension just as I like it, because I think it would be a really, really good vehicle to drive.
Yeah. I like the G90. I like all of their sedans. What Genesis really needs is to make an SUV.
Well, it's coming.
They do. It's coming.
Yeah, some spy photos just popped up yesterday or today, of the GV80 that's coming next year, or actually probably later this year.
Yeah, get on it, Genesis, because we like you. We like your cars.
Exactly. So just one final point on this. It says with freight and handling, it's $77,345.
A crazy good deal. I feel that's cheap for what you get.
I think for a V8 engine, for a 5.0 liter V8 engine, but it still is. I don't know. I think people are still struggling with spending that money on a luxury brand that isn't known as a luxury brand, and so I think that, the good folks at Genesis, who we really do like a lot, they have work to do on the image. I do love their ad campaigns. I think that they're so subtle. They're so beautifully done, but it's just building the brand up that they continue to work on.
Well, I mean, that's why they came out with the Hyundai Genesis in the first place, because they knew that they had some work to do with launching a brand, and it's $1 billion effort to launch a brand and have it work. Yeah. So they're working on it. Yeah, at least.
Yeah, they are working, and the main thing is that I think for the most part the product is there, and as soon as the SUV comes, though, I think that they'll do really well with that.
Yeah. I'm looking right now. I'm looking at the Genesis site. They have future vehicles for the GV80, and so it looks like it's the concept or just a rendering. Man, it has cool looking wheels.
Yeah.
I don't want to clean them, but I hope they bring those to market. It's just, Genesis and Hyundai and all of their brands have shown that they're very motivated to do what they set out to do. And if anybody can pull it off, I think it's that company at this point.
Well, and the designers there, I mean, I think they have fantastic people behind the brand.
Yeah.
I want Korea to kind of leave them alone and let them do their thing, because nobody does these kinds of things better than Manfred Fitzgerald and the group that he has.
Right. They got a nest of Germans over there.
They do. It's just, they have great, Erwin Raphael and Kate. And I mean, they just have really, really good people working there that have a very clear vision of what they want this brand to be. And they just, I think the main thing is that Korea needs to leave them alone and let them do their thing, because these are pros.
Yeah. Well, all right. Topic time. Speaking of, I can't even link it together. We talked last week about the FCA and Renault thing, and now that is apparently blown up. The rumor that I guess I picked up from it was that FCA and Renault fell apart because of Renault's relationship with Nissan, but also there was some sort of French government meddling in there.
Yes.
It's just all
the French government owns 20% of Renault.
Right.
Is it 15? I thought it was 15.
It's 15. Okay, maybe it might be 15 now. Yeah, it used to be 20%. It's probably 15 now. So they own a significant chunk of Renault, and a big part of Renault has prior to his arrest, Carlos Ghosn had been trying to engineer a merger of Renault and Nissan. Because right now through the alliance they're partners, but it's not one company like Fiat Chrysler is. So you've got this kind of strange relationship, and Renault owns, I think, 40% of Nissan versus I think only about 5 or less than 10% that Nissan owns of Renault. And Nissan has been unhappy with the relationship for some time, because they feel that Renault has too much control over what Nissan does. Even though Nissan is a bigger company, they sell almost twice as many vehicles a year as Renault does. And Nissan has been pushing for the French government to reduce its stake in Renault, so that they can try to make this relationship more equal between Renault and Nissan. And all of that, apparently as part of this proposed merger with FCA, Renault and FCA, the French government wanted to kind of slow that down a little bit and deal with the Nissan issue first, and figure out what they were going to do with Nissan. And FCA apparently said, no, forget it, we're out of here, and they walked away from the deal.
So, because they felt like the French government was not being a reliable partner in that, or like
I think it's more that they. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as not being a reliable partner, but more that they weren't doing enough to streamline the deal. Let's put it that way.
I see. So maybe just making sure we keep those French plants open, those union jobs in France, and
I think that I don't think they were really comfortable with the idea. Well, first of all, people were really pushing, saying that Nissan had to be part of this conversation, and more than they were, because initially Fiat Chrysler said, we just want to talk to Renault. And as we've talked about the last couple of weeks, since this has been going on, it's sort of like, it's like sister wives. Well, it doesn't really always work like that. Like you all kind of have to talk to each other.
That's the wackiest metaphor I think we've had on the podcast.
And I guess Nissan's not crazy about doing anything with FCA because I guess they still have hard feelings about the whole Ram Titan deal that fell apart back in 2009.
Oh, that's right. And then what about? Isn't there a lawsuit from Reed Bigland too that's out there?
Well, that's a whole
that's
separate
totally
that's a whole separate issue. Yeah, but yeah, back in in 2008, 2009. Chrysler, before Fiat Chrysler, had a deal with Nissan to do a badge engineered version of the Ram, what became the 2009 Ram, as a second generation Titan. And after Chrysler went through bankruptcy and then got taken over by Fiat, they canceled that deal. And so Nissan had to go back and basically start from scratch and design a whole new Titan on their own, which they were not thrilled about that. Although they did get the Cummins 5-liter diesel V8 out of the deal, which was originally supposed to go into the Ram as well. And after Fiat took over, they dropped those plans and went with their own 3-liter V6 diesel.
Was a Motori diesel that wound up in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
it was that. It's strange enough. There's actually a Cadillac connection there too.
That's right, because Cadillac paid for the
engine,
funding. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that engine was originally developed as a 2.7 liter that had been announced by Cadillac. In 2007, they were going to start putting it into Cadillac vehicles in 2009, at least in the European market and possibly also in North America. And when they went through bankruptcy, they killed that program. That was one of many programs that died in bankruptcy. And so that engine got reworked into a 3-liter version, which went into Jeep Grand Cherokees and Rams.
So much intrigue.
This is better than a soap opera.
Well, I mean,
seriously.
You've got the French and the Italians, so right there off the bat. And then you add in, Nissan and America. It's just, it's a global tryst. I don't know what else to say. So where does this leave FCA? Because I think they also just announced a partnership with a very small EV startup like today or yesterday.
FCA?
Yeah, I thought I had seen something. Yeah, some kind of partner. Hang on while I go to the Google and...
Okay. While you're doing that, I will share the thoughts that I shared with Joanne Muller the other day. One way that this could possibly play out for FCA, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, Rebecca, is potentially going back and working with Volkswagen, because Volkswagen is looking for it seems like they're looking for partners to take up some of the slack with for their electrification programs for the MEB. They would like to get more volume out of the MEB platform.
Sure.
And they've been in talks with Ford for a while now. It sounds like from what I've heard that the talks on the electrification side have largely been shelved, and pushed to the side while they're focusing on autonomous stuff. And so perhaps, what we might end up seeing is a partnership where FCA gets to use the MEB platform for some of their electric programs, doing a deal with Volkswagen, and possibly even, maybe using the PPE platform, which is their premium electric platform, which is the next generation on. They've got the J1 platform is what's going to be used for the Taycan, the Porsche Taycan, and the Audi e-tron GT, and then from that's evolving into this PPE platform, which is their next generation premium performance platform. That would be great for FCA to potentially use for Maserati and maybe even Alfa Romeo models going forward. And so, that's a deal that, maybe short of a full merger or a takeover, would be an interesting approach, that would be beneficial to both Volkswagen and to FCA, to get more scale, to give FCA access to electrified platforms and to get more scale for those platforms for Volkswagen. What do you think?
I think that's a really good idea. As I would picture this, though, as more of, I don't know if I have the right words, but sort of, it's more of a casual relationship, if you will, rather than a full-on merger. Because I think
with Volkswagen, you mean? FCA?
Right,
yeah.
with Volkswagen.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's. I guess I would put it as a little more than casual, but a more formal partnership, but not a merger. Something closer, something closer to what the Renault Nissan alliance is, but maybe without the cross shareholding.
Let's call it friends with benefits.
Yeah, there you go.
So, because I'm a big fan of if companies and brands have a commonality in the customer that they're serving, in that voice of the customer. So I think that the voice of the customer for brands like Fiat and Dodge and Chrysler, Volkswagen, that sort of mainstream, I think those mainstream brands, I think they could be served, especially on electrification, because you're not necessarily, it's interesting because Volkswagen's been pushed into being a early adopter sort of brand, but that's not really who their customer at the mainstream level is. At the luxury level, though, especially when they have a separate platform like they do, if they can spread that over, into Alfa, into Maserati, I don't know if they would share it all with Ferrari at all, but then they're serving a different customer. That voice is a little bit different, a little bit more posh, but to get those economies of scale could be really significant in terms of preserving or trying to get to profitability on these products that have such high investment in intensity. So I think that could be really, really interesting and definitely something to look at further.
Yeah, definitely. And given that EVs are growing, and they're going to continue to grow at a fairly strong pace, but they're still going to remain. Like our projections at Navigant are that by 2030, EVs, like full battery EVs, are still only going to account for about 20% of global sales by 2030.
Wow.
So it's still a fairly small fraction of overall sales. I mean, at that point, that's over 20 million vehicles a year. But if you can share some of that, if you can share some of that investment across a broader range of vehicles, and one of the things about EVs, as you shift from internal combustion engines to EVs, internal combustion engines have, that's always been a key product differentiator. Kind of the way engines feel and sound has been a way that manufacturers have differentiated their products from one another. But when you get into EVs, that's a lot harder to do with an EV, short of just, pure raw acceleration numbers or, efficiency. The actual character of the vehicle does not really change all that much, from one EV to another. And so, the need for everybody to have their own motors and their own battery packs becomes a lot less in that case, and you're going to focus on other areas for how you differentiate your model lines.
Right, exactly. I mean, and the thing is that, as always when you're looking at sharing componentry, it's what is the customer touch? What do they care about, and how do they differentiate a vehicle? And as you say, we're going to start differentiating things differently. And it's a very tired comparison, but it's tired because it works. When you think about your phone, we have a very different definition of a phone than we did, 15 years ago. And so with that evolution in potentially 15 years, we could be looking at how we define a car very, very differently as well. And a lot of those parts, customers don't care what the circuit boards in our phones look like, and they don't care what the circuit boards in the cars look like either. The main thing is, does it work? And the batteries are the same kind of thing.
I kind of care that they've got like surface mount technology on my phone that I can't use or service when it breaks, but that's just me.
Yeah, but you're a geek, so that doesn't count.
Yeah, we're seeing that kind of consolidation across the entire market too. Like BMW and Jaguar Land Rover are doing the same kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah,
they have to.
Yeah, they just announced a deal to partner on electric powertrains. So,
But they have to, though, because these things are so incredibly expensive and require such high investment at a time when consumer demand doesn't match. You know, I mean, that's the key thing too here, is that this isn't a case where consumers are tugging at the demand pull to say, I want these vehicles. They're really being pushed onto the market, and your goal here is limiting your loss. You know, it reminds me of when years ago I worked at Banana Republic, and when we had our outlet stores, it was just about managing the loss. We knew that everything we sold there, nothing was sold for profit. And so you just knew it was going to the outlet, and you're managing that loss. How can we minimize the loss at the outlet store? And it kind of reminds me of this, where, you know, how do we minimize the loss of every EV that we sell?
Yeah, well, they have to sell some EVs too. So that was the issue that, you know, that got us compliance cars. But I think they're in this place now where they need to figure out in the sort of startup world, they call it demand creation or demand generation. They need to figure that out, and how to create the demand for something that's not a Tesla. Tesla has certainly masterfully created a demand for their product.
Right, but they haven't created a demand for electric vehicles.
Right, and so that's...
Well, I think what they have done is demonstrated that electric vehicles can be appealing in their own right, aside from the the green factor, that they can be an appealing product in and of themselves. But what they haven't done is demonstrated that they can function. They can be a real functioning automaker that can reliably build the products and service them and deliver them to customers.
Well, I think the e-tron and the Taycan, will be really telling in terms of future demand for EVs.
Yeah, I've heard nothing bad about the e-tron. It looks like everybody's saying...
Well, you haven't read Dan Neal's review, have you?
No, I have not. But in terms of the impressions, everybody seemed to kind of be impressed, as you were, Sam, about they put a good car together that delivers on what they say it's going to do, and they did some very thoughtful, clever engineering. So some of those trade-offs that you make for every EV are sort of lessened here, and they do out Tesla in some ways. But so that's still on the model of, we're going to make an EV, and it's going to be a premium brand, and the people who buy it are not nearly as concerned about money. It's not an economic play. It's a luxury good play. And so if you're FCA, that's tough for you, right? Like you need to find the white space in the market. Certainly you can do that with Jeep, and you can do that with Ram. I guess you make the premium version and have the EV, but what about a Dodge EV? Like, what's that going to be? How are you going to generate the demand for that?
Well, do you need to do that? Does every brand have to have an EV?
You certainly have to be able to sell enough volume of EVs to be able to meet regulatory mandates, in places
on a corporate basis,
right?
Though.
But and certainly for FCA, right now, Dodge, is a shrinking brand for them. Ram and Jeep are, those are the volume brands. That's where you've got to get some electrification, is into those two brands, and for Chrysler, or for Ram, Jeep, they're already on that pathway to electrifying those. Yeah. But Ram, is going to be a challenge. They're going to have to figure out how they're going to handle electrifying some Rams.
For sure.
They're already starting though, right? Like with the hybrids and stuff, with the battery that's in the back.
Those are mild hybrids, but eventually they're going to have some plug-ins as well to meet.
Yeah,
if they're not going to keep buying ZEV credits from Tesla in perpetuity, they're going to have some plug-ins of their own.
This is also where I could see some negotiating going on between Volkswagen and them to potentially be able to if they can combine somehow get enough of a merger that they can count their credits. And who knows what happens with CAFE in the future also, because now it's changing with every presidential administration. So, we could see a change, and if there's some way for them to be able to either continue to buy credits, as you say, or that conversation takes on a life of its own in terms of what counts now as CAFE.
Right. Well, the cost of buying credits, that's going to get increasingly costly for these companies, that can't meet the mandates on their own, because the percentage of plug-in vehicles that they have to sell in places like California and the other 9 ZEV states is going to continue increasing, unless the feds can win their court battle to revoke California's waiver, their Clean Air Act waiver.
Right.
Oh, that's going to take at least a couple of years, though. Like that decision or that battle is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court, unless the Supreme Court decides not to hear it. But if that's what happens too, then you've got lower court decisions that are going to stand. Like that's just going to be a mess. Then. Right,
but in the meantime, as you said before, the economics of EVs are still very challenging. Especially at the mainstream, in the mainstream segments. At the high end, you can kind of make it work. If you can have an appealing enough vehicle, and you can reliably build it, and actually do it. You can potentially do it profitably in the premium segments, but that's not enough volume. So you've got to also sell some mainstream EVs in order to get the volumes that you need. And today, if you look at the for 200-mile EVs, everything is going to be in the $35,000 to $40,000 price range at a minimum. And the example I gave when I was on this panel at this UBS conference this week was look at the Kia Niro. You can buy a base Kia Niro hybrid that gets 50 miles per gallon for just over $22,000. You can buy a Kia Niro EV, which is a really great EV that gets 239 miles of range. Starts at $39,000, and with the federal tax credit, you're down to about $32,000. So you're looking at $8,500 to $9,000 difference, cost premium, to go from a 50 mile per gallon hybrid to an electric version of the same vehicle. And with the fuel savings there, the payback period is going to be about 34 years.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So for the average consumer that drives 12, 15,000 miles a year, the economics of an EV just don't work. It doesn't make.
But you can't. But that's not why you buy one. That's the thing, is that you're supposed to buy it to save the environment.
Well, but you're not going to find enough consumers that feel that way. That's the problem.
Buy the brand new car.
I know.
If you want to save the environment, I don't think Tesla and EVs are a really great example to point to, given
I'm repeating marketing.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't actually believe that.
But it's just like it just reminds me of Ed Niedermeyer's sort of fascinating look at what's been going on in Fremont. Cars aside, just how mismanaged that plant has been, and all of the just straight nonsense.
The whole company is just it's a mess. It's not about whether they're electric or not. It's just a very badly managed company, because Elon may have some great ideas and some stupid ideas too, but the overall philosophy of wanting to do the right thing for the environment, I'm all for that, but he should not be running the company.
Right. That's he needs a new set of people actually running the day-to-day so that he can go off and do crazy ideas, because that's what we need him for.
Who says we need him?
I do. We need people that push the envelope. We need people that push boundaries like that think of crazy things like let's go to Mars, and push and push and push to make it a reality.
We don't need to go to Mars.
I know, but the idea. Look what he's done with SpaceX. It's brilliant.
This is why I say we don't need him, because it all of a sudden becomes a cult of personality, and we forget the people at Tesla who helped really build Tesla that weren't Elon, and SpaceX is the same thing. A lot of hardworking people.
There is, but there's people, but we still do need people like him to motivate and to rally people. And I mean, from that standpoint, I do think that he also needs to hire adults.
He needs to
Tesla.
be an adult. though. Like
yes, and I've said that. I have said that on the air on CNBC, and because I do believe it, is that the way that the childish mind is where imagination lives, but it's not where running a company lives.
A childlike mind. Childish.
A childlike mind.
See?
Yeah, childish. You don't want childish. You want
a childlike mind. And that's what I appreciate about him. It would be terrifying to work for him, but I think that, but I do think that he needs to have very experienced people running the company now.
Yeah. I mean, we need visionaries for sure. I just, at a certain point, the smart visionaries know when to just like get out of the way. You learn these things hopefully through self-discovery. I've learned I'm a good starter. Sometimes there are things where I wind up needing to really buckle down with sort of the sustaining part of that. But the starting phase where it's new and it's interesting, that gets, you get going with that. So once you learn these things about yourself, then you can kind of make sure that you're not the problem.
And that, a lot of people like to compare Elon to Steve Jobs, and this is the thing that I always tell people is that the two of them couldn't be more different, because, where Elon fails and Jobs succeeded is that Jobs, especially when he came back to Apple in 1997, he was self-aware enough to realize that he didn't care about and wasn't good at that day-to-day operational stuff. That was not where his strengths laid. He liked, to develop the product vision and focus on what are the things that the company should be doing at a high level. And, working with his design team, with Johnny Ive and the rest and the engineering team to create great products. And he was smart enough to bring in people like Tim Cook and also to put the other leadership team in place to handle all that day-to-day stuff that he, knew he wasn't good at and didn't really care about. Elon does not have that self-awareness. He thinks he's the only one that can do it all. And that everything has to be done exactly his way, and he's a total micromanager, and that's the last thing you need in a big organization. In a company with 40,000 employees, you cannot run it that way. One person cannot run the company that way. You have to be able to delegate, to the organization and count on them to do the right thing and put the right people in place and give them the authority and the responsibility to do those jobs. And then you can have an organization like Apple.
To be fair,
hopefully without the $1,000 monitor stands.
Yeah, it's not even a Visa stand. But to be fair, Jobs was an asshole tyrant too.
Oh, absolutely. he totally was,
for sure.
But he was able to step away from, the operational stuff. He was able to recognize his weaknesses and get the right people in those positions to pick up the slack in those places that he wasn't good at. Elon does not recognize any weaknesses in himself.
Yeah. Which is a weakness in and of itself.
Yes.
And that's like pretzel logic. Anyway.
So speaking of electric vehicles,
let's get back on track. Take it away.
Okay.
Sorry.
So Volkswagen this week during the NBA Finals launched a new ad campaign with an ad called "Hello Light." Have either of you two watched this ad?
Yes, I had some. So because we're an advertising agency, it went around internally, and I had to be the buzzkill on Slack about it. Everybody really was like, "Oh, this is great! This is marvelous! This is wonderful!" And I was like, So
I'm surprised I didn't see it, only because I've been watching the NBA playoffs. So it must have been when I was. Was it Wednesday night? Because I was flying. I didn't see the whole game.
I think it launched on Wednesday, Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah, so I missed it.
Yeah, it's Simon and Garfunkel, Sound of Silence, and it's an interesting, evocative ad, and it's actually very good.
Yeah, but what do you think about the message? So for those that haven't seen the ad, as you said, Dan, it's you got the Sound of Silence, playing. And the first half of the ad, you're hearing audio clips from news reports, through late 2015 and early and into 2016, as Dieselgate was breaking. And so it's all these, clips, essentially, Volkswagen, what they seem to be trying to do with this is acknowledge, that yes, we screwed up with diesels, with the diesel emissions. We shouldn't have done this. And now we're trying to make up for it. And then, it transitions into this, teaser for the ID Buzz, the new microbus that's coming. But showing a concept that debuted 2.5 years ago and won't be coming to market for at least another 2.5 years. And saying we're going electric, which I showed it to my wife. We as we've talked about before.
What did your wife think of it?
We owned a Jetta TDI wagon for almost 7 years that we sold back to Volkswagen, and she was pretty pissed about that. I mean, she loved that car. She loved driving that car, but she was pretty pissed about the whole thing, and she thought the ad was disingenuous. Was bullshit.
That was about my take on it. Because there was a couple of things in there that really sort of left me going, this shit again. Boomer nostalgia with Simon and Garfunkel. Enough of like the Woodstock generation and that the way the Volkswagen bus was linked up with them. We all get it. You had a good time in the 60s. We get it. But really it's an interesting bit of recompense. Like I like that they're acknowledging like, hey, we screwed up. But this doesn't whitewash it all away. Like they cheated on emissions. They knew they were cheating on emissions, and it was a period of years. And now to try to say like, oh, you know what, like it was a bad thing, but like, look, we're making it all good now with this new product that's not even here, that we've created a beautifully produced ad for. It's a lovely ad, and it was expensive, but it's very, I don't know, it feels disingenuous to me. Feels like they're trying to burnish their image, and this is their shot at doing it. And especially sort of just like jumping onto the interest behind both EVs right now and the fact that anytime you show that there's a new VW bus coming, people are going to get excited, especially the baby boom generation, which still buys a lot of cars. So they're going to, look at it, be interested in it, talk about it, chatter about it. And so you'll get some marketing hay made from that. But it's kind of cynical, isn't it?
Go ahead, Sam,
go ahead, Rebecca. You're the marketing expert here.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, Scott Keogh, he's the president and CEO of Volkswagen Group of America. He is a marketer first and foremost, and he's a very slick New Yorker. I find him to be very authentic, though. And so I'm sure that he was the voice behind this. I think they're in a really tricky, there's almost no good way to kind of broach this subject, because you're not going to get everybody to agree on their approach either. So I do give them kudos for at least acknowledging it and not pretending like it never happened.
Yeah, I'll give him I'll give him props for that. That's good. And there is they run a very tricky path, because there is the nostalgia play, and as you say, Dan, there are still a lot of baby boomers buying Volkswagens, but at some point you have to move beyond that, because you are now appealing to Gen Xers, and we really liked Volkswagens as well. Sure. But the younger generation doesn't necessarily have a clear point of view of what Volkswagen is. And I do think that some of them are probably deeply
offended, even if they never owned a Volkswagen, they would be, outraged at the blatant lies and corporate malfeasance that went on there. So, I think that I think they would have there's going to be a diverse amount of reactions anytime you approach this kind of ad. Now, I do think it's also interesting. I was reading that they were debuting it in the Women's World Cup. I think today, is today the 11th? I don't even know. In 2 days. I'm sorry. They're going to be running another ad in the Women's World Cup, which will be interesting to see as well. But I think that with the people that are at Volkswagen that are running the show right now, I think they figure that they've got to do something, and it's pulling at the heartstrings. It's acknowledging what they've done. It kind of checks a lot of the boxes that people recommend.
But that's what it feels like, is a box checking exercise. Like, this is textbook. If you want to start rebuilding your image, here's the things you need to do. And maybe I'm too close to the industry.
Yeah, I've been thinking that, in some ways at first, my initial reaction was, does anybody outside the industry remember Dieselgate? But certainly the owners do, right? And that's the thing,
and that's
too.
At least 500,000 people in this country.
Yeah, well, right. And so it's smart to do that. But yeah, do people know they're being played? Are they being played? I don't know.
They're definitely. So in terms of being too close to, I feel like I'm too close to both industries, the sort of the automotive and the advertising industry, because I looked at that, I was just like, I see right through your nonsense. And it's an emotional ad. If you get caught up in it, it's beautifully done. And I love the original air-cooled Volkswagen bus. And so it's hard for me to not feel an affinity for that, and just the story it tells of how we burned the midnight oil and we tried to make it better after we made it worse, and here's this new thing, and it's a new bus, and that's all cool. And I don't have a problem with the vehicle. Like, I think the vehicle is probably going to be good if it's actually what we get. How can you argue with a van? An electric van. But
shouldn't it also be maybe focusing on some of the product that's actually going to be, coming sooner, and some of the stuff they have now, like, the e-tron. Well, this is not an Audi ad, but, as a group, as a Volkswagen group, they're going to be launching a whole slew of new electric vehicles, starting with the ID3 later this year in Europe. We're not going to get that one. We're going to get the ID Cross next year. But it just seems like, maybe the focus on the van, is that part of it, is kind of, maybe the cynical part of it, along with the music. It does come across as maybe a little bit cynical.
Yeah. And so if I take my emotions out of it and look at it from a marketer standpoint too, like, yes, you're already introducing new cars. You're going to have new ones on the market. That's fine. They're not going to get, you can't make an ad for them, even with a Simon and Garfunkel song, that is going to have the potential for earned media that this one does, because it's a new Volkswagen bus, and news directors looking for chitter chatter talk points to fill that last 30 seconds of their broadcast are going to pick up on this. And so it's going to be one of those things that I think they went for doing this, even though the product's not here yet, to generate some interest, but also it probably can have a larger footprint than advertising one of the other products that's going to be here sooner. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're in such a tough spot, because almost every time they broach the subject, every time they talk about bringing this $50 million investment in electric vehicles, it's because they have to.
Well, so you don't know it's because they have to, and that's.
I'm sorry, it's 50 billion. Yeah. I was thinking million sounded really low. 50 billion, but they do have to. It's court ordered.
No, I understand that, but the general public doesn't know. that's what they have to
No,
do.
actually, the development of EVs is not court ordered. That's not part of the settlement.
It's
this
the,
is something
Electrify America.
that they decide. Yeah,
Yeah.
the EV charging network is part of their settlement. The investment, $50 billion investment in new product is. It's obviously driven in part by the need to move on from diesel, but it's a decision that they made on their own. And actually, that whole process started before Dieselgate.
Yeah, I mean, everyone was developing EVs before Dieselgate, right? Yeah. I mean, everyone was involved in EVs, and I'm not saying they wouldn't have had EVs. And as I said, I'm a big fan of their Audi EV, the e-tron. It's just, I think that the marketing is always going to be tricky in this particular case. So they actually have a new branding campaign called Drive Bigger, which is going to debut during the FIFA Women's World Cup on June 11th. So I don't know if if either of you have seen an ad for that yet, but that's coming up then as well. It's a vision for the brand to do better and commit to its plans with honesty, is what I've been told.
Well, they better not pick another damn baby boomer song. No offense to any baby boomers. Just, you know what? My first reaction, she was like, "Oh, Paul Simon's such a jerk." And they didn't even use the actual, the original version of that song. So the original version was just acoustic. It was Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. That was what they had done for their CBS test. And then while they're in Europe touring, CBS was like, "Hey, we want to make this the single. Can you get some session musicians on it?" And what makes that song great is just the session musicians that figured out how to play with the push and pull of the time on that. The story behind that song is really fascinating. You should go check it out.
Well, given that you're promoting electrification, you probably want a band playing electric instruments, right?
Right. Oh, no. So now they're going to pick something from Newport 65, right? When Dylan went electric.
There you go.
You are in the weeds, my friend. Deep.
Sorry.
All sorts of fun things.
I mean, I'd be okay if they used the version of the Star Spangled Banner from Woodstock that Jimi Hendrix did. That's totally fine with me.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Make it drop on July 4th. All will be forgiven. I think we've done a podcast.
I think so, too.
Yes. I do have to finish up on a very serious note.
Yes.
One of our colleagues, Davey Johnson, has gone missing in the Sierra Nevada area, the Calaveras and Amador County area of Northern California. He's been missing since
Wednesday.
Wednesday, June 5th. And they found his motorcycle. They found possessions. They found clear evidence of him parking on Route 49 heading northbound by Big Bar Launch. And they are still actively looking for him. So we're just sending out our, thinking of Davey, his fiance / girlfriend, depending upon how closely you know them, Jacqueline Trope, and just, his friends and family, and hope it has a good resolution.
Yeah. It was like 1:00 last night, and I was still looking at my phone. My wife was like, what are you up to? And it's like, Davey's still missing. And it's kind of, this isn't really a big industry. And we've all talked to each other. We all know each other, even if we're not super tight. It's enough to shake you up a bit, And it's I think too, because he was part of Jalopnik when I was part of Autoblog too. So there's that sort of camaraderie there. It hits quite close.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the key writers that gave Jalopnik its original voice, back in 2006, 2007 when all this stuff was kicking off. And he more recently he's been the Northern California editor for Car and Driver. He's written for a lot of publications over the years, and he's a really interesting writer and an interesting guy too.
Yeah, he really is. So we just wanted to, acknowledge that, and if any of our listeners are up in that area, there's big search parties going on. There's professionals that are heavily involved in the case, and so we're just thinking about them.
Yeah, and we should thank them too. They've been working hard, and everybody's on the edge of our seats waiting for updates. And in the meantime, those folks are trying to give them to us. So
yes, yep, yeah. So just thinking of them.
Yeah. All right. Well, until next week, please go to Apple Podcasts. Give us a review. Let us know what's on your mind. And you can find us on social media. We are at Wheelbearings Cast. Only vowel is the A in cast on Twitter. We're around. You know where to find us. So
Yeah.
we'll see everyone next week.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.